All right, so what we got today is a caliper. This is off an 05 Accord. The pins are one of the pins is seized, which is fairly standard. You'll find that fairly frequently. And I broke off a bolt getting it apart. Go figure. Now, what obviously failed on here was this boot that sits on the piston. I really want to have this apart to take a look at the parking brake mechanism and see how that works. I do have to make a warranty or a core return on this guy, so I can't tear it down too much, but we'll take a look at what we can look at. I'm going to put on some gloves because that thing is nasty. All right, so on the body of it, I think it's just that cast aluminum steel. It's cast steel because it rusts, obviously. This piece back here is the spring to help hold the pads in place. This is the better style of the anti-rattle springs. The other kind where it's just like a V-spring that hooks into the back of the pads is a huge pain in the butt. We got the bleeder screw here, 10 millimeter. So there's the bleeder screw. It's just drilled through and has a hole at the bottom. Nothing too special. And when you unscrew it, this nipple seats to seal in the bottom of the bore in there. You can see maybe. And then when you unscrew it a little bit, the fluid is able to come up through, and that's how you bleed the brakes. Pretty simple. If you're watching this video, I'm sure you're already aware of that. Ooh, that's leaking. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that back snug. All right, tap that. So obviously what failed is this boot. That's fairly typical of these things. These boots tear, and I guess they make them out of such cheap material, and they're so thin they just don't hold up. I don't actually know how this piston comes out of here. The self-adjusting mechanism to adjust the brake twists in and out on this thing. Maybe if I get a big enough pair of channel locks. Try the air one more time. There we go. Ugh, made a mess. So this arm, just get this out of the way. This goes on here. It holds the parking brake cable in place like that to pull on this prong here, which moves, excuse me, moves this bolt in here, in and out, which faces on this guy right here, which has a very high twist, and it looks like it's a 1, 2, 3, 4 start thread in there. And that's what actually adjusts the parking brake. So when you twist this, it kind of pre-adjusts the piston to get you some adjustment in there. Man, got brake fluid all over everything. All right, so down in there we got a pair, let's look at this one first. Got a set of snap rings. See if we can get that, or not a set, just one, but you know what I mean. All right, so we've got a spring, which is going to put some preload on this piston to kind of encourage it, coax it to pop out a little bit as it twists. Got some residual brake fluid in there. And then we've got this piece, which faces in there. It's got a square head so that it twists when this pit twists, right? So that's fairly simple. And since I got to return this, I suppose I got to put it back together. All right, on here, so this whole thing is bathed in brake fluid, so you couldn't really go in here and lubricate it any other way. One thing that I do that seems to help is I will often, if it's a dual piston caliper, to keep one of them from seizing up, I'll take these out and I will put just a whiff of silicone lubricant on there. Here's the stuff. Napa sells it. You do not want to use the spray can stuff. Anything that comes out of a spray can has propane and butane and stuff like that as the propellant, and it will eat these rubber seals, or can eat these rubber seals if they're not set up to deal with it. So you got to be careful with that. So if you're lubing anything that's underneath a rubber seal, this stuff is safe for basically everything. It's pretty safe. All right, so down in here, got another snap ring way the F down there. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get that out. So I'm guessing this seal has a metal band at the base of it. That's what they typically have. Yeah, this boot is gone. Completely gone. All right, so here we've got rubber seal, which is going to seal on the piston. Feels like it's just like that rubber Buna stuff. It's fairly stiff, though. It's a pretty high stiffness. Stiffer than a standard O-ring, I would say. Venture to guess. And then above that, we have the boot, which is retained somehow. Okay. All right, yeah, so that just sits in there. So there's just a series of lips. Yeah, you can see that's... And see, this is part of the problem with brake fluid, too, is it just corrodes everything. Unless the surface is finished to take it, it just eats away at any sort of unfinished metal, any sort of unfinished steel anyway. Stainless probably holds up to it just fine, which I'm guessing that's what this inner wall is. Or it's chromed. That's actually probably more likely what's going on based on the amount of rust. It's probably a chromed finish inside of all these parts to cut down or to keep the brake fluid from just eating everything, because that's what it's apt to do. Which incidentally, the new, like the silicone brake fluids, there's that spring. The silicone brake fluids, other than being a pain in the ass to work with, don't have that problem because silicone is inert. Same thing what they make fake boobies out of. All right, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this lower snap ring out, which is unfortunate because this is the part that I really want to see. All right, got her out. Yeah, so that doesn't really have much bite to it. I don't think I've ever seen that kind of snap ring before. But anyway, what else we got in here? So we got another spring with what appears to be a shim. And that might be as far as we're going to get. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we've got a, this is definitely a very custom part here. All right, so it's a 4, 4. Anybody? Yeah, it's a 4 start screw with a pretty substantial angle on it. So, you know, obviously this isn't like your standard fastener. The purpose of this is to advance this piston. So this faces in here. When you twist the piston, that sets the adjustment for the parking brake. and it's supposed to be self-advancing. So that spring in there is supposed to help, you know, when it relaxes, if there's not enough pressure on it, it should kind of self-advance a little bit and keep your parking brake tight. It's got to have a certain amount of preload on it to start doing that process, but they seem to work fairly well, unlike drum brakes. All right, so you can see down inside the bore here is a hole. I am guessing that is the inlet for the fluid. Well, the pressure. I'm sorry, the feed for the brake fluid. So when you step on the pedal, it comes in there. I do not immediately see how to get this lower seal out. But I think that everything behind this seal is not bathed in brake fluid, it's bathed in grease. So this mechanism is designed not to be exposed to brake fluid. And that would make sense. If you look at the taper, if I put it in front of the camera, if you look at the taper on that seal, you can see it's tapered so that the brake fluid couldn't go this way. It's keeping that stuff in, because obviously the grease is going to be low pressure. You don't have to worry about that coming up. This seal feels like the same stuff that this seal was made out of. So it's going to be a high pressure hydraulic seal of some sort. Yep. There we go. That's all it took. All right, so yeah, we do have a needle bearing in here that's partially open on one side. Made in Japan, whatever it is. And I think that was only bathed in grease. So we've got this channel down here is for the bleeder. So what I said earlier was wrong. I don't know if you can see that. Not a great angle. Down here. And then there's a second channel way back in there. I don't know if you can see that one as opposed to this one. Right, so that one way back in there, which when I pressed on that, this little guy popped out. There is an O-ring seal on the back of here, which feels just like a standard O-ring wherever it went. Yeah, it felt just like a regular O-ring. So what must be happening, there's no way that little O-rings can hold a lot of pressure. So I guess that little O-ring, all this guy is doing is helping to retain this in there, I think. That's all that rubber seal is doing. Probably for assembly. Make it a little easier to go together because it's not sealing anything. Other than, oh yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, it is. It's sealing out grease. Keeping the brake fluid from going into the grease tray. So you can see this is through hole drilled, easy for me to say, with this pin here to keep the brake fluid out of the grease in the back. And then we've got this piece, which appears to be, I think it's just steel. Steel with like that zinc, yellow zinc coating on it to keep it from rusting. And that's going to face on this pin here, which presses on the back of this guy. And that's it. So the brake fluid is actually getting in behind here and pushing on the back side of this piston. So it's really not moving it very much at all. Does that make sense? Yeah, that makes sense. Huh. Well, I guess there you go. First time I've had one of these apart. Thanks for watching.